So the first guy that I want to talk about here in May, because again, this depth chart could change. We could be doing another video here in another month or 3 talking about the current guys at that point in time that are on the Browns depth chart at running back. But as of right now in May 2023, the top guy behind Nick Chubb is a guy that this is an interesting case. I'm super excited about this kid. I know a lot of Browns fans are. I know a lot of guys on this podcast are excited about Jerome Ford, second year back out of Cincinnati. He was a 5th round pick last year in the NFL draft. The Browns, when Jerome Ford fell to the 5th round and the Browns scooped him up, I was elated. I was so pumped. Go back and watch any post-draft videos from this podcast that we had. I'm talking big stuff about Jerome Ford because I watched a lot of Jerome Ford in college, and it was not because he played at Cincinnati. It was not because he's in Ohio, played in Ohio school or anything like that. See, I do a lot of fantasy football research on rookies, primarily only the offensive side of the ball, obviously, because it's fantasy football. I don't play in any IDP leagues. And Jerome Ford was a guy that the whole college season in 2021 is like, man, this kid is going to be great in the NFL. Whatever team picks him up, I'm going to be watching because he could be a sneaky add to a fantasy football roster. Well, lo and behold, he falls to the Browns in the 5th round and they scoop him up. And it was like, that's the kind of situation that I was projecting for Jerome Ford. Kind of an under the radar guy, not a whole ton of college production over his career, but a kid that in his final season in college absolutely lit it up and just showed that when he is the guy for an offense, he took it. He was the guy for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Like I said, 2021, monster season for Jerome Ford at Cincinnati. 215 carries, 1,319 yards. That was good for 6.1 yards per carry. 19 touchdowns. That's a huge stat transitioning from college to the NFL. 19 touchdowns. 21 additional touches. He had 21 receptions for 220 yards and another score through the air. As far as his size goes, Jerome Ford is definitely the ideal size for an NFL running back, 5'11", 220. He's got that big body that can take the brutal beating that the running back position takes in the NFL. And what was really impressive for Jerome Ford in that 21 season in college, okay? He put up arguably his best games when it mattered the most against stiff competition. In the conference championship game against Houston, Jerome Ford, 18 carries, 187 yards, good for 10.4 a carry and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that was Jerome Ford. Now, the Bearcats had themselves in position to make a run at the college football playoff, but you know, it's tough for teams like Cincinnati who aren't from the bigger conferences to really make a push for that. But that conference championship game, Jerome Ford pretty much put the team on his back and said, we are going to the the college football playoff. And they did. They got into the college football playoff, went up against Alabama, where he carried the ball 15 times for 77 yards. Not a huge number, but you got to remember they were trying to put up points, so the ground game was kind of eliminated partway through that game. That was still good for 5.1 a carry. Jerome Ford against stiff competition, you know, especially when you're running behind an offensive line that's not, you know, filled with future NFL players, going up against a defense like Alabama where, you know, the majority of those guys on the defense are going to go to the NFL in some capacity. Jerome Ford absolutely showed that he belongs on the football field with NFL talent. But in terms of college production, that was pretty much it for Jerome Ford. That was his only season with even 100 or more carries in a season. Like I said, 215 that year. But he went, like I said before, when he was asked to be the guy, he was the guy. So the lack of college production profile over his entire career presents pros and cons for Jerome Ford on the Browns in the NFL. One, okay, so he doesn't have a huge college production profile to pull from. You can't point at multiple years of success, leading a team, being the guy, handling a full workload. That's a big deal for guys coming to the NFL at the running back position. Is he capable of handling a full workload? Now, obviously, we're not talking about Jerome Ford in the top running back spot for the Browns, but next year, the year after, who knows? Nick Chubb, God forbid, please, and don't anybody kill me for saying this kind of stuff, but God forbid he goes down with an injury week 1. Who takes up the load? You have to have somebody capable of carrying that kind of workload throughout the season. Can Jerome Ford do it? Well, he only had 1 year where he was asked to do it, where he was given that type of workload. He did it. He proved that he could do it, but it was just the 1 year. But at the same time, on the other hand, the pro of that low utilization in college is that he's got low tread on the tires. He's got low mileage. He is fresh. He has fresh legs coming into the NFL. Last year for the Browns as a rookie, he only had 8 carries for 12 yards. That was it over the whole season. So if you look at college and now 1 year in the NFL, he only has 327 total career carries between college and pro. So Jerome Ford, 23 years old. This year during the season, he will turn 24. Last year as a rookie, he suffered a grade 3 pedal ankle ligament tear, placed on IR, missed 4 games. So Jerome Ford did suffer an injury last year. Again, at the top of the video, I was talking about the Browns being kind of fortunate with the injuries and everything at the running back position. Well, here we've already got the guy that is pegged to be Nick Chubb's backup now. You know, in his first year with the team, he wasn't playing a whole lot other than special teams, of course, which is where he suffered the injury. He did play quite a bit of special teams, but he already suffered an injury. Now, I'm not projecting injury for anybody, but I am saying this is a position, again, I will repeat this, that suffers injuries. We have to have depth. So in 13 games, he only played 14 total offensive snaps last year as a rookie. Like I said, special teams is where he made his money last year, 145 special team snaps. That's where they used him a lot. We did see some juice out of him like in the preseason and on those special teams in the kick return game and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, looking at a running back coming out and dominating in the preseason and looking really good, you cannot project that over a regular season against, you know, the defense's best players and starters every week. We see that with John Kelly, who's a guy we'll get to later here in the video. But I see a lot of people on Twitter and in the comment sections on YouTube saying, well, we have John Kelly. John Kelly's looked great every preseason. You know, we should just use him as the backup with Jerome Ford. Guys, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but John Kelly has been on the team for a couple years now, and he's never made it off the practice squad except for whenever both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were both hurt. There's a reason that John Kelly remains on the Browns practice squad, and no other teams are signing him to their active rosters either, okay? Looking great in the preseason, you have got to be careful with using preseason as a projection for regular season. You just do. So back to finish up with Jerome Ford, though. Like I said, only the 14 offensive snaps all season. There were only 2 games, though. Out of the whole, like I said, he played 13 games, and primarily all of those were just special teams. There were only 2 games the entire season as a rookie that he actually got offensive snaps and carries. He got 5 carries in week 13 against the Texans, and then he got 3 more carries in week 17 against the Commanders. Like I talked about earlier, only 8 carries all season for 12 yards. And here's the kicker. His long on the season was 9 yards. So that means in those 7 other carries, he only gained 3 yards. Now, I'm not saying these numbers to say, guys, Jerome Ford he isn't the dude. He isn't the guy. He isn't the answer. We can't depend on him. No, it's not what I'm saying at all. I like Jerome Ford a lot. As I said, I was excited when the Browns drafted him. I'm excited that he's on the team this year, and I think that he can excel. My personal opinion on Jerome Ford is that he can be a successful backup to Nick Chubb this year, and I would not be surprised if he develops into an eventual, you know, I don't want to say maybe like a lead feature back, but a 1A or a 1B with somebody else in the offense if that's the direction the Browns end up going down the road. But for now, I do believe in Jerome Ford. I really do. But we do have to caution ourselves and say, okay, there is a lack of production profile here. Yes, in one season where he was asked to be the dude for a college team, a lower, you know, what do I want to say, a lower talented college team that made a good run, he helped lead them and carry them into a college football playoff game against one of the best teams in all of college football against Alabama. And he played great in both those games, like I said. But so far in the NFL, he has not been asked to do. Now, whether or not his lack of carries as a rookie was just because, you know, we gave Nick Chubb so many carries, or we were relying just solely on Kareem Hunt as the backup, whatever the case may be, there is very little to essentially no NFL production to pull off of as of yet for Jerome Ford. But my hopes are still high for him. But that is the main guy right now. When it comes to the Browns' depth chart at running back, the only two that you can really count on at this moment in May for the Browns roster come September, Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford. That's it. Like I've said plenty of times before, guys, we're not going into the season with 2 running backs. There will be other running backs, at least 2 more on this roster when the season begins.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Dawgs Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at the Dawgs Podcast. Get your thoughts on the show at thedawgspodcast.com.